How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. Got Nick Gimbel joining me today. No particular reason, just like talking to him. What's up, Nick? Anything exciting going on with you these days?
Uh, you know, Fully moved into
Oh,
Orlando.
cool.
I I hear there's a Stanley Cup Final happening on Wednesday,
I did hear
and I
something about that. Yeah.
hear and I hear that one of my predictions was right. My Avalanche are facing off against the Tampa Bay Lightning on Wednesday night in a series that the entire hockey world needed to see. This is the matchup that hockey deserves, and it's going to be spectacular.
Well, congratulations are in order for multiple reasons. One, your redemption story of the terrible picks you made last year's Stanley Cup. Your words, not mine, but your redemption
Yeah.
story this time. And then the fact that your Avalanche making all the way to the Cup, first time since 2001, and they're trying to get in the way of a Tampa Bay Lightning three-peat, which is, a rarity in any sport, much less the NHL. I actually want to start back in that 2001. I know that you've been an Avalanche fan, Colorado sports in general, really, your whole life. You would have been a wee lad back in 2001. What memories, if any, do you have of those days?
So it actually starts further back than that. The Quebec Nordiques were sold and bought by a Denver tycoon back in 1995. So the Quebec Nordiques became the Colorado Avalanche in the 95-96 season, and that's when they won their very first Stanley Cup. I was born in December of 96. So if
Okay.
you want to go even further back, that's really where it was I was born in 1996. Realistically, December of 96 was the 96-97 season when the Detroit Red Wings won it, but we're not going to talk about that. The birth year of 1996 is the year that the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup for their first time. Obviously, wasn't born yet for it, but that's the story that I like to tell.
Sure, yeah.
2001, only would have been 5 years old. Unfortunately, I don't have any memories of it. What I do have memories of is back when the iPod video was a thing. I purchased the Stanley Cup Game 7 video, the full 2 hour and 45-minute game. I downloaded that onto my iPod video, and I would watch that game over and over and over again. Game 7 against the New Jersey Devils when Ray Bourque finally got his cup after 22 years. The Avalanche haven't been back to the Stanley Cup final since then. They're 2-for-2 in Stanley Cup finals, hoping to make it 3-3.
That must have taken up the entire memory space on your iPod video, if I had to guess. A whole almost 3 hour video. That must have taken
It
up the
it
whole 8
took
gigs.
it took a good 75% of the memory, but it was all worth it. Listening to Gary Thorne say Alex Tanguay with 2 goals in the game, it's ingrained into my memory now, and it's just amazing.
So we were sitting here about a month ago and we dug really deep. We went through the bracket. We went through maybe if we're lucky, we'll get the Lightning and the Panthers. We'll get the Florida Cup in the playoffs. We did get that, but that was nowhere near the competitive series that we all thought and maybe hoped that it would be. And we spent a lot of time on the East and on the West. Once we got to the West side, I was like, we'll just pencil your Avalanche right in there. And you agreed with me. I'm sure you had more to say at the time. But how confident were you that this could happen? Obviously, they were, I believe, the number one seed going in. So it's not like it's an underdog story. But like you said, not been there since 2001. It's, there's certain teams that get the number one seed that doesn't necessarily, for people that watch college baseball these days, Tennessee was the number one overall seed in the country, and they just got knocked out in the Super Regional. So like the number one seed is nice, doesn't necessarily mean anything until you back it up.
So I was confident to get at least through round one. This is the second year in a row that the Avalanche swept the first round. This year it was against Nashville. Second round is the hurdle. I said it last year when we had this discussion, and I said it earlier a month ago. The Toronto Maple Leafs cannot get out of round one. That's their hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
That's their hurdle since the 2000s. The Avalanche have not been able to get out of the second round in however long I can remember. And finally, they got over that hurdle, and then they just swept the Edmonton Oilers in what I thought was going to be one of the most entertaining series out there. And The 4 games that they played, it was fantastic. But then they swept Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Edmonton Oilers. And unfortunately for the Edmonton goaltender Mike Smith, it was just return of the boogeyman. Because back in 2019, when the Avalanche beat the Calgary Flames in round 1 of the playoffs, it was Mike Smith in net for Calgary then. Now he's on the other side of the Battle of Alberta for Edmonton. That was a heck of a series in itself in round 2, the Battle of Alberta. You want to talk about battles of provinces and states? Forget about the Battle of Florida. Calgary and Edmonton is what the Avalanche and Red Wings used to be in the 90s and 2000s. The Battle of Alberta was everything we hoped and dreamed it could be and would be. And I think they just I think the Edmonton Oilers just ran out of steam. The Avalanche were just too much to handle. And, this Stanley Cup Final series is going to be even more than what people are anticipating. These 2 teams only play each other twice a season. And both games this season were decided by a difference of a single goal. One of them went into a shootout. These are teams that are built to play against each other.
You kind of touched on both of them. Both these teams get into the cup with at least one sweep to their resume in the playoffs. Which one I said for a minute, we thought we were going to have a great Florida Cup, in the playoffs, ended up being a sweep. Which, to semi be unbiased if you can, which sweep do you think was either more impressive or, gave them more momentum going in? Because like you said, they kind of had, it was basically a rival team that was swept on both ends there. So like, which one do you think, obviously winning the Western Conference championship in a sweep is probably helpful, but which one was either more surprising or do you think was more dominant?
Surprising and dominant, I'll put into 2 different categories and I'll separate them for each team. The more surprising one, I would say, is the Tampa Bay Lightning sweeping the Florida Panthers. Florida Panthers were the #1 team in the NHL this season. The President's Trophy winner, first in the East. They had home ice advantage. They traded for Claude Giroux. Sergei Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight in net, coming of age in goal. But for whatever reason, the Panthers just ran out of steam. And I don't know if fraud is the right word, because I do believe they were the team that they were showing all regular season. But it's almost like after the Lightning lost Game 5 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's almost like the Lightning said, okay, now we're going to play hockey for real.
Mm-hmm.
And then they rattled off 6 straight wins, the Game 6 and 7 against Toronto, and then the 4-0 sweep against Florida. I think that's the more surprising one back in round 2. But I think the more dominant win in the series for the sweep is for the Avalanche here in the Western Conference Finals against Edmonton. They shut down, you can't really shut down players like McDavid and Draisaitl. For Edmonton, they equate to essentially a Gretzky and Messier type of tandem, just a 1-2 punch. But in order to minimize the threat of Connor McDavid the way that Cale Makar, the Avalanche defenseman, can do, and then unfortunately for Edmonton, Leon Draisaitl playing basically the entire round with a high ankle sprain, the poor guy could barely stand up on both feet towards the 3rd period of Game 4, and the Mutants still put up 4 points. Just the battle level of the playoffs is unmatched in the NHL.
I do agree with when the #1 seed goes down early or at all, really, people throw the word fraud around. And it doesn't matter the sport. That does kind of irritate me because it's almost like it's the difference between a marathon and a sprint runner. Like you see it in other sports. Like I applaud the NHL for like having what is essentially a regular season champion. I think that's a different skill set to have. So to win that is still an accomplishment and things like that. I look at like in the MLS, when a team goes deep in like the Open Cup, it's going to affect their regular season, but it's worth it if you go all the way to the Cup. So like, I hope it's something the NBA actually does in the future. I think a commissioner's trophy, I'm sure like Adam Silver will be all for that, but something to that effect would be helpful. And I think it is different of like a regular season champion is just a whole nother skill set. And then when it comes down to like, you have 4 games to keep it moving, it's just what you do to keep that top point total, I think, can affect you in the playoffs. You might know the answer to this. I don't know the last time a President's Trophy winner went on to win the Stanley Cup, but I don't think it's often, and it doesn't happen, all the time.
Unfortunately, I can't think off the top of my head. I think it was pretty recently.
Mm,
I want to say that the Tampa Bay Lightning in after they got swept against Columbus.
mm.
I I want to say it was not.
Well, I
No,
guess the point being is it doesn't happen
yeah,
often. Like there might have been one in
no.
recent time, but it's not something
It's
that happens all
literally
the time.
called the President's Trophy curse,
Right.
because it's almost like the Toronto Maple Leafs curse. They can't get out of the first round, and if you win the President's Trophy, then it's almost like this little dark cloud over you. And what I can tell you is that the Colorado Avalanche back in 2001 won the President's Trophy last time they won the Stanley Cup.
So I took a minute to look it up. Only 8 times has the President's Trophy winner also won the Stanley Cup. Most recently, the 2012-13 Blackhawks. So it has been a minute.
Black,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's definitely so going into this one. I don't know, like obviously this wasn't a sweep, but one of the more entertaining series for just the casual viewer, I think, was this recent Rangers and Lightning series. And for a minute there, it looked like the Rangers had their number. It looked like everybody was just going to win on their home ice. And if you kept that going, that means the Rangers would have came out on top. Do you think there's any sort of blueprint that they laid to, try to derail the Lightning that have been on this crazy 3-year run?
So there's two main factors to this, and it's not necessarily blueprint oriented, it's a perfect storm. So remember back when we talked a month ago during the whole Stanley Cup playoff preview, and I mentioned Igor Shesterkin and the Rangers goaltender facing off against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the rivalry he had. Igor Shesterkin is going to be one of the next great goaltenders in the NHL. He's a phenomenal netminder, but he is not Andrei Vasilevsky. So in those first two games, the Lightning were shocked at how infrequently they could score
Mm-hmm.
on Shesterkin. He stood on his head. The other factor is, and the head coach of the Lightning mentioned this, John Cooper mentioned this, the Lightning had 7 or 8 days of rest after their sweep against the Florida Panthers. They came into Madison Square Garden completely just way too slow, not ready. It's this whole card game of, okay, well, if you sweep your series and you have 8 or 9 days off, you're rested, you can get healthy. But if you're playing a team that comes off of a dramatic game 6 or game 7 win and they have energy and momentum, they may not be the healthiest, but they played a high stakes game 48 hours ago as opposed to you playing your most recent game a week ago. That's a factor that not a lot of people take into account, and it's kind of why I'm thinking the Lightning are going to win game 1 in Denver on Wednesday. The Avalanche swept the Edmonton Oilers. It's going to be like a week and a half off for the Avalanche.
Right.
I do think that the Avalanche are in a position that they haven't been in before. We just mentioned that the last time they were in the Cup final was 2001. Not a single one of these players on the Avalanche currently were on that roster. So there's a grand total of 0 players that were on the Avalanche for these super deep cup runs. There's a couple of players like Arturi Lehkonen, who scored the overtime game winner in game 4 to send Edmonton home. He went to the Cup final last year with Montreal. So there's a couple of players on the Avalanche that have been there before, but it's nothing like the Lightning and having 50 to 70% of their team been there, done that, and then some more.
And to wrap up this other point, as I mentioned, there's only 8 teams that have won the President's Trophy and the Stanley Cup in the same year. 0-1 Avalanche, one of those 8 teams. I'm sure you knew that, but I wanted to throw that out there for the listeners. But yeah, the rest thing really is, man, it's a double-edged sword. People were saying it about the Lightning, like you mentioned, and now it's the Avalanche. When you have between 7 to 9 days rest, for some teams, it's exactly what they want. And for others, if they could play 48 hours later, they could. Like, it really depends on the team. There's no right answer. I think in most sports, if it's a veteran team, the rest is welcome. But if it's a young team, sometimes the momentum is better than the rest. And that's not like for every scenario, but that's a good rule of thumb to go by. So given that you've kind of spotted the Lightning game one, as an Avalanche fan, you can put your bias cap on now if you want. What percentage confidence do you have that the Avalanche can take home the cup this year?
Oh, I'm hesitantly confident,
Okay.
if I can put it that way. And that is with me. This is the Avalanche fan right now saying this.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm hesitantly confident that the Avalanche will beat the Lightning for a couple of reasons. One, players like Stamkos, Hedman, Kucherov, Point, they have their back-to-back cups. I'm not saying they don't want it. Of course they want to win.
Right.
But the coronation of Nathan MacKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, the list is endless of these players that don't have that cup yet. The desire for the first one is greater than the desire for the third or fourth or fifth one. That desire is still pretty damn big.
Sure.
But that desire for the first one is bigger than the desire for the third one. For that reason, I like the Avalanche. But we just mentioned the been there, done that factor.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing of playoffs being a sprint, yes and no. This is a best of 7 series. You've got to win 4 games against your opponent in order to win. We all know that. In that sense, it's a marathon. You can't get too high, you can't get too low. The Lightning know this. They have 11 straight playoff series victories. And you want to know one of the craziest things about that too? We're spending all this time talking about the Lightning sweeping the Florida Panthers in round 2. That's the only sweep they have in all 11 playoff series victories. Wow. They only have that one sweep. And let's see, first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs went to game 7, and the conference final against the Islanders last year went to game 7. Everything else was settled in game 5 or 6. That just tells you how hard it is to get a sweep in one playoff, let alone to do it twice like the Avalanche did this season. It's such a dominant team, and the depth on both sides is apparent. You have one of the biggest acquisitions. I bring him up every time that we talk on this podcast, Phil. Patrick Maroon on the Tampa Bay Lightning. He is the three-peat champion right now. He won in St. Louis, and he's been there for both back-to-back championships.
Right.
For the Lightning. Having a depth player like that just adds so much value, and he scored in game 6 for the Lightning against the Rangers. And then you have a behemoth of a monster, Zach Bogosian. He's supposed to be the fighter. He's supposed to be the enforcer, and he's stick handling out there like he's Sidney Crosby. It's ridiculous the depth that the Lightning have, but I think the Avalanche have the same kind of depth. Players like JT Compher is not a well-known player, but he has so many points this playoff, and he's one of the few Avalanche players that has played in every single game. It's the depth is there for both teams. It's going to come down to goaltending, and Vasilevsky is the superior goaltender. Darcy Kemper took a stick in the eye in round 1 against the Nashville Predators, and the Avalanche have had to turn to their backup goaltender, Pavel Francouz, and he's been great. He's been doing really, really well. But the been there, done that factor for Vasilevsky and how steady he is just something that I don't think either Avalanche netminder can match.
If Maroon wins another one, we got to start calling him like Robert Horry on ice, because he's just on the right team when they're going to win it. One thing that clicked with me a few minutes ago when you kind of described both teams' rosters and their experience, it's kind of a mirror image of like the Super Bowl that we just had with the Bengals and all the young players, and the Rams with either experience from their Super Bowl a couple of years ago and the players they've brought in. Much like the Lightning, you know, people have given them crap for this in the past, but like their salary cap just seems to be different than everyone else's, the way they, you know, mend things and everything. And I don't even necessarily mean basically they have no shortage of weapons anywhere, whereas the Avalanche seem to be more, properly built or whatever. So like that, just the way you explain that kind of brought it up. And I agree. I think like the hunger for the first cup, the first championship is always going to be more than the other one. And when I did actually my Super Bowl preview, I had my good friend Joey, who's a diehard Bengals fan, and I remember asking him this question. I think it fits here too: win, lose, or draw for either team, which team would you think has the best chance to get back to this stage? I imagine it's the Lightning because they've been there so many times, but the team's also getting older, and like it's hard to keep this together. People are always going to try and pick that key piece, off the bench to be a bigger role on your team, money and everything. But which team do you think would have the best chance to get back here in a year's time?
Tampa, 100%, and I'll tell you why. The Avalanche only have 5 or 6 players under contract for next season.
Oh, wow.
They gave away so many assets for this specific run. It is cup or nothing for this Avalanche team. Nathan McKinnon is making like $6.5 million, and his contract is up after this year. That's a $12 million a year player based on his numbers, but he's going to take a team-friendly deal. Cale Makar just signed an 8-year deal. He's a $10 or $11 million player, but he signed for 8. But players that the Avalanche general manager, Joe Sakic, traded for, players like Josh Manson, the defenseman, Andrew Cogliano, Arturi Lehkonen, they're on 1-year deals. Darcy Kemper's on a 1-year deal. He traded for from Arizona. The Avalanche don't have players to play for them next year. The Lightning do. Expect this Lightning team to at least make another run or two, whether they make it to the Stanley Cup Final again the next year or if they just wind up ending it in the second round. They're going to be a playoff team with this core for the next couple of years. The Avalanche, it's going to be hit or miss. It's no pun intended. It's going to be a rocky climb. It really is. So it's really cup or bust right now for this team. Real quick, we are talking about Patrick Maroon being, the one player to win 3 Stanley Cups in a row rather than just the Lightning winning 2.
Yeah.
Cory Perry is the second player in NHL history to reach the Stanley Cup Final in 3 straight years with 3 different teams.
And
back in the bubble, he was with the Dallas Stars, who the Tampa Bay Lightning beat.
Sure.
Last year, he was on the Montreal Canadiens, who the Tampa Bay Lightning beat. Now, Cory Perry is on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they may get beat by the Colorado Avalanche.
Right. I did remember hearing that story. He's there was one guy, I couldn't tell you the name, but when it was like Warriors and Cavs every year, there was like a bench guy that was on the Warriors the year they lost, and then the Cavs one of the years that they beat them. Really quick, I just want to give you time to talk about, like, as a fan, what this run means to you, because I have parallels of, like, as a Magic fan growing up. Like, I saw Penny Hardaway play live. I was too young to remember, like, Penny and Shaq, but we all know what happened, and I've watched millions of things on it and everything, similar to, like, the 96 Cup for you. And then now, like me with the Dwight era, I got to see the team as, like, a high school kid at least and appreciate that run. So you as a fan, you have that iPod video of 96 that you've watched a million times and all those other things. As a full-grown adult at this point, what is this, even if it ends now, what has this run meant to you as a fan?
To me as a fan, you don't want to have that whole cliche of it means everything to me, because there are things in life that don't revolve around sport. But having this run, I was texting Chance the other night.
Shout out to Chance.
I think it was during overtime of Game 4 when the Avalanche beat the Oilers, and I said, "This is the first time this deep in the playoffs that I actually care about a team in the playoffs, in the conference final.
You're not just watching it to watch."
Right. I can remember, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even sooner than that. The Avalanche had a league low and franchise low 48-point season. 48 points. That was absolute rock bottom for the captain Gabriel Landeskog, for the veteran defenseman Eric Johnson. I'm pretty sure Nathan McKinnon was on the team at the time. You had just it was just rock bottom. Every other game and then some was a loss. And now, without even realizing it, winning is the standard. And every single night they play, you both expect them and are prepared for them to win. And it's just an amazing feeling, just knowing that on Wednesday, whether I watch it or not, that the team that I grew up idolizing and watching and being a fan of has a chance to do something that they haven't done before for the entire time that I've been cheering for them. I don't know any of them personally. I've seen them in person once in Tampa. I have no personal connection to these human beings who have no idea I exist, and yet I'm rooting for their ever-loving success. It's incredible what sports does for an individual, for a group of people if you're watching it together. But to watch this unfold without even taking a second to step back and realize that either way, whichever way this series goes, the Lightning are immortalized as a dynasty, or the team that I have idolized since I was born is getting their first Stanley Cup since 2001.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know about Nick's broadcasting background, you just heard it there because that was beautifully said. And I think it really, like you said, sports, they mean nothing and they mean everything at the same time for certain people. You know, some people will never understand where that comes from, and people like us will never understand how people don't see it that way. You're usually on one side of the fence. You get those rare people that get it, but it's just not their cup of tea type of thing. And it's a great run to go on regardless of what happens. I got nothing against the Lightning. I know people that are casually fans, but when I think of, people that I know that are hockey fans, you're the first person I think of. So not to go against my Floridian roots here, but I am rooting for your team. I hope you get that moment, like growing up an Eagles fan and having all the shit talked about, like 0 rings or whatever. I remember waking up on the day of the Super Bowl and just like the day felt different. Obviously this is spread into anywhere between 4 and 7 different days, but I hope that when you do get up, that you think that day feels a little different too. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I am rooting for you. And I hope that you get that moment, my friend. The first time I had you on, I derailed the episode at the very end to ask you about Letterkenny. So I'm going to do the same thing today. Have you watched Shoresy yet? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I've seen clips of Shoresy, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I've seen I haven't been able to see a full episode because I don't have Hulu anymore, and it's only on Hulu in the United States. It was out like a full month in Canada before it was out in the United States. I haven't been able to see a full episode of Shoresy, but again, it pulls from the same characters, it pulls from the same story, it pulls from just more and more of the same, and it's great.
So what I learned, I did a little research. The reason it came out like 2-3 weeks earlier in Canada is they actually released it like episodically. They released like 2 every weekend for a couple of weeks. There's only 6 episodes, so that was on Crave, and then they dropped it here. I think it's worth getting Hulu back for like a week or something, a free trial or something. Just check it out because it's awesome. So you won't get this yet. You might from the clips you've gotten, but as we get out of here, at least for this season, hope the Avalanche never lose again. And I hope you get that moment that you deserve, my friend. I appreciate you jumping on here. This was very last minute. I had air conditioning problems all week, so I wasn't able to record because fans and microphones don't mix well. So we kind of did this at the drop of the hat, and I think it went really well. So enjoy Wednesday night, man. You deserve it. And thanks again for your time.
Real quick, I want to give everybody the most useless yet interesting stat of the night for our parting words.
Hit me.
This is the first time in NHL history, and only the second time in the history of all 4 major U.S. sports, where the teams that meet in the championship game or final round of their season series does not include a plural team name, i.e. the name does not end in an S. This is the Lightning versus the Avalanche. This is the first time in NHL history that it is not a plural name versus a plural name. It's singular versus singular. has absolutely nothing to do with the play on the ice. It's your most useless stat of the night, but to me, it's one of the most interesting ones.
I'll see your useless stat and raise you one more as we get out of here. Some people are almost calling it like the natural disaster bowl because it's like, lightning, it's like natural things that are happening. Also a useless stat, but people did bring that up as well. Nick's always great to talk to you, man. I appreciate your time. Best of luck on Wednesday and moving forward, man. I hope to have you on win, lose, or anything at the end. So have a good week, my friend.
Of course, Phil. Go Avs, go.
All right, you guys heard it here first. Enjoy the Stanley Cup first puck drop on Wednesday. This will be out probably by Tuesday. Plenty of time to listen to it beforehand. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.